Well, for more reaction to that story, we're now joined on the line by the President of the Psychological Society of South Africa, Professor Sumaya Laher. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, Professor. The MPs in Parliament, despite this report having been public for some time, still shocked hearing the testimony of the Health Ombudsman. What were your thoughts today?
Well, I mean, as you can see, the numbers are rising, and it's such a big tragedy that it took so many deaths for government and for MPs and for politicians to basically wake up to the fact that mental health and mental illness doesn't deserve or doesn't get the amount of attention that it should get in our country. So, I mean, it's a tragedy, but it's a tragedy that we all need to learn from and we need to go forward. I'm very happy to hear the Minister say that the recommendations are already being implemented. I know that some of our people from the Psychological Society of South Africa, as well as from the Society of Psychiatrists, have been consulted. There have been task teams going out to see the NGOs, and our task teams have made various recommendations as well. So what we're hoping now is that the Minister and government will follow through on the recommendations that these task teams have made, that it doesn't happen that while it's a media buzz, there's attention for it, and then after that, the mental health and well-being of patients and of the country are forgotten.
So, Professor, as a psychological society, one of your core missions is to make sure that the mental health and well-being of South Africans is protected. Were you aware as a society of some of the failings of these NGOs and this whole move? And did you make representations to the Gauteng Health Department?
I think if you see our website, you'll see that even before all of this happened, we had written to the Minister and a few other people in the ministry as well, and said that we don't think that this is a good idea. While we recognize that deinstitutionalization is something that's happening more and more, it's happening worldwide, deinstitutionalization can't just happen like that. There needs to be policies in place, structures in place, procedures in place, and more importantly, you need to make sure that the places where you are going to place patients are adequately equipped. They have the right equipment, they have the right staff, the place is structurally sound, it's equipped for the patients. And we were assured by the Minister consistently that this was the case. They were not just placing patients into NGOs. These NGOs were thoroughly checked that everything was appropriate. And then obviously we now know the situation that we're in.
So the MPs are calling for senior officials to face criminal charges in this regard. There are health professionals, doctors even, working at the health department in Gauteng. So the question is this negligence on the basis that they didn't fully understand the seriousness of the case, or do you think that, carefully considered, they still ignored advice?
You know, I would like to say that I think the advice was ignored. I don't know if it's a conscious negligence on the part of the people involved. I think that generally in our country, whether it is MPs or whether it's the population, mental health and mental well-being is just misunderstood. People don't understand what happens here. There's stigma attached to it, and it affects everyone from that perspective. So I wouldn't necessarily commit and say, well, maybe the Minister should have known better or shouldn't have known better, because it could be that there was a strong lack of understanding on the part of the Minister in terms of what was required. But certainly on the part of the societies, the Psychological Society, the Psychiatric Society, and SADC, we had informed the people concerned that this, we think, is done rather haphazardly, and we think that more consideration should go into this. We think there should be better planning. We think that the conditions for this haven't been adequately met, but we were ignored.
As I think about this case, I'm wondering, 100 people and counting have died in this particular incident. Is it possible that over time, lesser numbers have died, but have perhaps gone under the radar just because of the lack of numbers of people passing away, and perhaps that there were unnecessary deaths?
Yeah, that's difficult to say. You'd have to look carefully into the various institutions. It is normal that when people are extremely sick, that you are going to have deaths, right? But in this particular case, the amount of deaths and the time frame within which they took place, it doesn't really correspond with what would normally happen. And that is why you would ask questions. And you would ask questions particularly because now we're finding out more and more about the state of these NGOs, the facilities that are available, the staff that are available. So when you add things up in this particular case, it's very clear that this is not just a normal incident.
All right, so what should happen now? It's on the radar. I think one of your colleagues has said that mental health should get a AAA rating and not the junk status that it's been given at the moment. What will mental health wellness look like after this, if this report is taken seriously and that health departments across the country raise awareness?
Well, I mean, I think once the task team's reports come out, you will see a very clear plan for what mental health should look like in this country. A clear plan that includes deinstitutionalization, that provides more access and care, not just to people in hospitals, but generally for the South African population. And I think if we can continue keeping an eye on this and keeping government accountable to what's said in the report and to make sure government follows the recommendations in there, we can see vast improvements. And for instance, these people don't seem to think of what the cost of mental health and well-being is. If you look at the global burden of disease, a lot of diseases are lifestyle diseases. Those lifestyle diseases arise because of mental health and well-being problems. And if we can focus more on the mental health of our population, of our patients, we can actually increase our economy, we can increase better life for all. And unfortunately, government doesn't seem to get that. I think if you look at the World Health Organization's stats, if you look at the reports that the Health Systems Trust are producing, you'll see there's links between mental health and poverty, there's links between mental health and other diseases that we see. And government really needs to start investing more in mental health. Government needs to pay more attention to the mental health needs of this country.
Professor Sumaya Laher, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for sharing your thoughts with us. Professor Laher is the president of the Psychological Society of South Africa, and I think everybody, including her, is hoping that this tragedy is a turning point in terms of how mental health is treated in South Africa.